Welcome back to the first trade. The retail landscape is continuing to take a hit from the coronavirus pandemic. Most recently, Nike reported a quarterly loss as COVID-19 store closures impacted its sales. And Macy's reported a dreadful quarter this week, too. Joining us to discuss all things retail is Sucharita, Kodali, Forrester, retail analyst. Sucharita, always good to see you here. I was on that Macy's call yesterday. It wasn't a good call. What's your level of concern on if Macy's can make it through a potential second wave of COVID-19?
Well, Macy's drew down a pretty significant line of credit in order to get it through not just the next several months, but potentially even the next year. Most of the retailers that I have talked to definitely think that they are going to have to strap themselves in for negative news for the next 4 quarters and possibly even for the next 6. So they are drawing down substantial lines of credit, including Macy's. So with that, they are going to hopefully be able to pay all their bills. They have released a number of employees. They have really reduced a lot of their expenses, like, for instance, their inventory expenses. They've cut back on things, I presume, like marketing that is variable. So they are trying their best to make it through the next few months. I think even Jeff Gannett has said that the expression, not just to describe Macy's, but all of retail, is that it is going to be smaller and more levered in the future.
To your point, Sucharita, we have had 16 bankruptcies for those who are keeping track since the beginning of the year in the retail sector, including big names like JCPenney and J.Crew. Not all of these bankruptcies have been surprises. A lot of these companies were weak heading into the pandemic. But do you think that we've hit the peak when it comes to retail bankruptcies related to coronavirus?
I don't think so, because coronavirus is still very much part of our daily lives and may very well continue to be part of our daily lives for another year, possibly longer. So in that, there is just no conceivable world in which I can imagine that the level of bankruptcies is over. This has been catastrophic, and it's not like the worst is over. There are going to be companies that will have unexpected expenses. They are projecting that likely sales will recover in the latter part of 2020. But if that doesn't happen, for instance, if there is a substantial second wave, there are going to be companies that just haven't drawn down enough credit to get them through the worst of it. And the retail industry has not asked for bailouts from the government the way that the airline industry and other sectors have.
Sucharita, a lot of these retailers have already tapped their credit lines pretty extensively. Who comes in the second half of the year and potentially saves some of these big retailers? I can't see the government going out there and buying all of Macy's. And even Amazon, why would they want a Macy's?
I agree with you. I don't think that that's why a lot of these department stores that are in a decent enough position will have to rely on their own assets. And in the case of Macy's, one of the biggest assets, of course, is the Herald Square store. So it's my understanding that's the collateral in some of the money that it's been able to pull down. But not everybody has. I mean, that, for instance, is the problem with JCPenney, is that it's already been in debt, and to be able to call on more is just not realistic. And I think that that's where you're going to see some of the biggest issues. Is you see this in private equity funded companies where they are just struggling and they're not going to be able to get the additional cash reserves, or certainly not at favorable terms. So, kind of what that full long list is, it's much longer than the companies that have declared bankruptcy to date.
You mentioned the government a few minutes ago. Should retailers be working together in a concerted way to ask the government for some kind of support, and what might that look like?
I am an advocate of that, because other industries have done the same, and other industries have been able to get some relief. And unfortunately, what has happened is that the PPP loans went to a lot of the smaller businesses, with some exceptions, but then there was so much negative backlash against anyone that was larger in a franchise that took it, that they weren't able to actually take advantage of any of it. And we do have sectors like the restaurant industry Street now allying to try to get some relief as well. So retailers absolutely are in a good position to do it. And the reason it's different now is that the expectation was that things would get better by now. The expectation was that the several weeks that we took off and shut the entire country down from the middle of March until May, at least until the end of April, was going to improve numbers, that it was supposed to get us back to normalcy. But the numbers are increasing, and they're increasing worse than we've seen to date. So this does not suggest that there's going to be any recovery that is of note in the retail sector. And that's the reason they need to get in line.
Sucharita, do you expect the holiday season will be here before we all know it? It always is. It always happens. Do you expect retail to just simply be chaos? I don't see lines out in front of stores. I see shipping delays. I see lower margins. I see pressured profits. I see impairment charges. You name it, I see it.
Right. I would actually say that there are a few retailers that will be doing okay. In the off-price sector, for instance, there are lines outside of TJ Maxx, and that's in part because they've limited the number of people in their stores. So it is a little bit of, kind of a mixed bag in terms of which retailers may be able to fare well through all of this, but the vast majority, particularly the mall merchants that are in the apparel sector and tend to be the brands that are the everyday brands that we've relied on in retail, like the Gaps and the Ann Taylors, they should strap themselves in for a pretty weak Q4. What we've seen is that the numbers that we saw in the month of April in retail overall took us back to the numbers that we last saw in like 2015 overall. And the numbers were even worse in sectors like, for instance, in the restaurant industry and the apparel sector, where those numbers took us back 10 years or more. So I would expect that Q4, while it will be better than Q2 and Q3, will be one of the worst Q4s that we've seen in many, many years.
Brian, you talk about squeezed margins. In my inbox every day, I am flooded with huge discounts from companies like Ann Taylor, Sucharita, you just mentioned. But I want to end on a positive note, the glass half full here for a moment. Which retailer or retailers do you think might actually be okay and come out strong or stronger after this pandemic?
Well, Nike had numbers that were less than what was expected, but they were less bad than most of the other retail industry. Lululemon this week had a huge announcement where it made one of its first acquisitions ever in $500 million, purchasing a company that competes almost with Peloton called Mirror. And Lulu's numbers during its first pandemic quarter were off by about 17%, but it recorded, I think in the month of April, triple-digit comp increases for its e-commerce business. So those are some companies that I think will end up faring okay through this. Anybody in the home sector is doing well, whether it's a company like a Wayfair or even Home Depot and Lowe's. So those companies are doing well. Anybody in grocery at this moment generally at least has positive numbers, although Albertsons didn't have a great IPO. I think that there are other factors leading to its challenges there. But there are sectors where there's disproportionately higher spending, and those are the retailers that we're seeing doing much better than the rest of the mall sector.
All right, let's leave it there. Sucharita, Kodali, Forrester retail analyst. Have a great July 4th weekend.
Hey investors, Zach Guzman here. Are you interested in learning more about the markets and getting the latest financial news? Well, then click right here to subscribe to our Yahoo Finance YouTube channel. Get the latest up-to-the-minute market analysis, big interviews in the world of finance, and information on how to manage your money every day wherever you are.